Picture this: a Germanic settlement near the Rhine. Spring morning, 447 CE. The mist rises from the river. Birds sing, children play. Then the ground begins to tremble. Not an earthquake, horses. Thousands of horses. The birds go silent. Dogs whimper and hide. Old men who survived previous raids begin to weep. You're the village headman's daughter, 16 summers old, considered the beauty of your tribe. Your father rushes in, face white as bone. The Huns, he whispers. Attila. He doesn't tell you to hide, there's no point. The Huns will find you, they always find the women. Through the morning mist they emerge, not the savage barbarians Roman propaganda describes, but something more terrifying, organized, disciplined, systematic. They don't charge wildly, they surround the village methodically, cutting off every escape route. At their head rides a man who would be unremarkable if not for the space around him. Even his own warriors fear to ride too close. Attila, scourge of God, king of the Huns, doesn't look like a monster. Priscus, who met him, describes him as short, broad-chested, with a large head and small eyes. But it's what happens next that reveals the monster. He doesn't order the attack, he sits on his horse and points at you, at your sisters, at your mother, at every woman between 12 and 40. The warriors dismount. They don't kill the men, not yet. First, the selection. Women are stripped, examined like livestock, the beautiful for Attila's court, the strong for labor, the rest for the warriors. Your father tries to protect you. They don't kill him, they force him to watch as you're bound and thrown across a saddle. The last thing you see is your village burning, the last thing you hear is your mother's screams. Welcome to the Hollow Throne. I'm your host, and today we explore how Attila the Hun weaponized sexual terror to build an empire that made Rome tremble. Content warning and thesis. This episode contains discussions of systematic rape, sexual slavery, forced marriages, and the use of sexual violence as military strategy. We'll examine historical accounts of mass sexual assault, tribute systems involving women, and the Hun practice of polygamy as political control. This content is disturbing but historically documented. Viewer discretion is advised. Attila the Hun ruled from 434 to 4053 CE, less than 20 years, but long enough to earn the title Scourge of God and fundamentally change European history. While popular culture depicts him as a mindless barbarian, the reality is more terrifying. Attila was a sophisticated strategist who understood that sexual terror could break civilizations faster than swords. The historical sources, Priscus's eyewitness accounts, Jordanes's Getica, the chronicles of Marcellinus, and archaeological evidence reveal a systematic approach to sexual violence that wasn't random brutality, but calculated psychological warfare. Attila didn't just take women as spoils of war, he created an entire economic and political system based on sexual terror. What makes Attila's story significant isn't the violence itself. Rape in warfare was tragically common. It's how he industrialized it, diplomatized it, and made sexual tribute the foundation of his empire's economy. He turned women into currency, terror into taxation, and rape into foreign policy. The twin princes. Picture this: the Hungarian plains, circa 410 CE. Two boys, Attila and his brother Bleda, learn the ways of the Hun aristocracy. Their uncle King Rugila teaches them that the settled peoples, Romans, Germans, Persians, are sheep to be sheared, and the most valuable wool, women. The Hun society that shaped Attila was built on polygamy and sexual hierarchy. A man's status was measured by his wives and concubines. Women were currency, captured in raids, traded between tribes, given as tribute. The young Attila learned that controlling women meant controlling wealth, alliances, and bloodlines. Jordanus writes that even as a youth, Attila showed a certain native force of mind, but also a coldness towards suffering. While his brother Bleda enjoyed the immediate pleasures of conquest, Attila saw the strategic value. Why kill a population when you could break them through their women? Dr. Christopher Kelly, historian of the Huns, notes, Attila grew up in a society where women were simultaneously valuable and valueless, precious as commodities but worthless as individuals. This paradox would define his approach to conquest. The education in Rome. In the 420s, Attila spent time as a diplomatic hostage in Rome, a common practice to ensure treaties. But instead of being Romanized, Attila studied Roman weaknesses. He saw how Roman nobles used marriage to secure alliances, how they feared for their daughter's virtue, how sexual honor defined social status. Most importantly, he witnessed the Visigothic sack of Rome in 410, where the Christian Visigoths notably restrained their troops from raping nuns and noble women. Attila learned a crucial lesson. Romans feared sexual violation more than death. This fear could be weaponized. When Attila and Bleda became co-kings in 434 CE after Rugila's death, they immediately implemented this knowledge. Their first demand from Constantinople wasn't gold, it was women. Specifically, Roman women who had married Huns and fled back to the empire. The message was clear: women who belonged to the Huns would be reclaimed, no matter where they ran. The murder of Bleda. For 11 years, Attila and Bleda ruled together, but their approaches differed. Bleda preferred traditional Hun raiding, quick strikes, immediate plunder, personal gratification. Attila envisioned something greater, systematic terror that would make empires pay tribute forever. Around 445 CE, Bleda died, officially in a hunting accident. Jordanes suggests murder. Attila, thinking his brother stood in the way of his plans, treacherously killed him. With Bleda dead, Attila could implement his vision of weaponized sexual terror without restraint. His first act as sole ruler was telling. He demanded the Eastern Roman Empire double its tribute, and specifically included noble maidens in the payment. Not random women, noble ones. He understood that taking aristocratic women accomplished multiple goals. It provided valuable hostages, humiliated the Roman elite, and demonstrated that no one was safe from Hun power. The tribute system, Attila transformed the traditional nomadic practice of bride capture into an international protection racket. The formula was simple: submit women as tribute, or we'll take them anyway after destroying your cities. The threat wasn't subtle. When the city of Nisus refused tribute in 441 CE, Attila didn't just sack it, he systematically raped every woman and girl, then sold the survivors into slavery. Priscus records the tribute negotiations. The Huns demanded not only gold but women of noble birth, virgins preferred to serve in Attila's household. The Romans, fearing worse alternatives, complied. By 447 CE, Constantinople was paying £2,100 of gold annually, plus an unspecified number of women. But Attila's innovation wasn't just taking women, it was creating a bureaucracy around it. He appointed officials to manage his growing collection. Women were categorized by beauty, nobility, and virginity. The most valuable became his wives. He had scores, possibly hundreds. Others were distributed to maintain loyalty among his chiefs. The rest were sold, generating revenue that funded further conquests. The Roman diplomat Maximinus, traveling with Priscus, observed, Attila receives virgins as tribute with the same regularity that he receives gold, and with the same expectation of increase should his demands be questioned. The destruction of the Balkans. Picture this. The Balkans, 4041 to 4047 CE. Attila launches yearly campaigns that aren't just raids, they're systematic programs of sexual terror. 70 cities are destroyed. The pattern is always the same. Surround the city, demand women as tribute, and when refused, or even when accepted, demonstrate the consequences of resistance. At Rutiaria, the Huns spent 3 days systematically raping every female from age 10 to 60. But Attila added a twist. He forced the city's priests to watch, telling them this was God's punishment for their weakness. The psychological warfare was deliberate. Destroy not just bodies but souls, not just individuals but communities. Marcellinus comes chronicles. The Huns left nothing living in their path save women reserved for slavery. Mothers killed their daughters rather than see them taken. Some women disfigured themselves with knives, preferring scars to Hun captivity. But Attila's most devastating innovation was the bride price system. After conquering a region, he would force the surviving men to buy back their women from the Huns, essentially making them pay to rape their own wives and daughters. Those who couldn't pay watched their women disappear forever into Hun wagon trains. The Gothic historian Jordanes writes, "The Scourge of God took pleasure, not just in violation, but in the complete destruction of family bonds. He would return wives to husbands only after his warriors had used them, ensuring no legitimate heirs could be certain." The court of Attila. In 449 CE, the Byzantine diplomat Priscus visited Attila's court, and left us the only eyewitness account of the Scourge of God's personal life. What he found wasn't the savage camp of popular imagination, but a sophisticated operation of sexual politics. Attila's primary residence, near modern Budapest, consisted of multiple wooden palaces, one for each of his principal wives. Priscus mentions Kreka, his chief wife, Ildiko, the Gothic princess who would be his last, and countless others. But these weren't just wives, they were political statements, each representing a conquered people or a cowed ally. Priscus describes a feast where Attila's wives served the guests. Each was dressed in the costume of her native land, a living map of his conquests. Roman ladies in silk, Germanic princesses in furs, Persian noblewomen in jewels, all reduced to cupbearers for Hun warriors. But the most chilling aspect was how Attila used these women diplomatically. When negotiating with ambassadors, he would parade the women from their nation, sisters, daughters, or wives of nobles, to demonstrate his power. The implicit threat: submit or your women join them. The court also featured a horrific practice: the virgin tribute ceremony. Monthly, tributes of young women arrived from vassal states. Attila would personally inspect them, choosing some for himself, some for rewards to warriors, others for sale. Priscus, bound by diplomatic courtesy, only hints at what happened after selection, writing, "The screams that night made sleep impossible." The Catalaunian fields and sexual propaganda. June 451 CE, the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, possibly the largest battle in ancient history. But before the fighting, Attila deployed his most effective weapon: sexual terror propaganda. He sent messages to the Roman Visigothic alliance detailing what would happen to their women after Hun victory. The Roman general Aetius recorded, "Attila promises to give Roman matrons to his horses, to make Gothic princesses bear Hun bastards, to turn our daughters into camp whores. Some of our Germanic allies fled before battle, fearing for their families more than death." During the battle itself, Attila positioned captured women where the enemy could see them, using their screams to demoralize opponents. One Visigothic chronicle states, "The Huns brought forward our captured women, violating them within sight of our lines, so that rage might make us break formation." The battle was indecisive, but Attila's sexual terrorism achieved its goal. The Allied forces, despite having the advantage, allowed him to withdraw. They feared what a cornered Attila might do to the thousands of women in his wagon train, hostages from a dozen nations. The invasion of Italy, 452 CE. Attila invades Italy itself. His pretext: Honoria, sister of Emperor Valentinian III, had sent him a ring asking for rescue from an unwanted marriage. Attila claimed this was a marriage proposal and demanded half the Western Empire as dowry. When refused, he came to collect his bride and her dowry by force. The invasion of Italy showed Attila's sexual terrorism at its peak. At Aquileia, after a 3-month siege, the Huns spent a week systematically raping every female survivor. The city never recovered. Modern Venice was founded by refugees fleeing Attila's sexual violence. At Milan, Attila found a painting of Roman emperors seated with Scythian princes prostrate before them. He didn't destroy it. Instead, he had it repainted, showing himself on the throne with Roman emperors pouring gold at his feet while their wives and daughters served him naked. The message: Rome's women belonged to him. But the most significant event was the meeting with Pope Leo I. Traditional accounts claim the Pope convinced Attila to spare Rome through divine intervention. Contemporary sources suggest a more practical negotiation. The Church paid massive tribute, including, according to some accounts, consecrated virgins from convents. The historian Hydatius writes, "What was given to turn away the scourge of God remains unspoken, but wagons left the Roman camp for the Hun, and in them were shapes that wept." The wedding night death. Early 453 CE. Attila, now around 47, takes yet another wife, a young Gothic beauty named Ildico. The wedding is lavish even by Hun standards. Jordanes describes, "He celebrated with excessive joy, given over to pleasure as never before." But this wasn't just a marriage, it was another political statement. Ildico likely came from a Gothic noble family subdued by the Huns. Her marriage to Attila represented the submission of her entire people. Some sources suggest she was unwilling, essentially a prestigious rape victim disguised as a bride. The wedding night, 453 CE. What exactly happened remains history's mystery. The official account: Attila, drunk on wine and lust, suffered a nosebleed and choked on his own blood. But Marcellinus suggests murder. Attila died by the hand of a woman. Some historians theorize Ildico, faced with rape by the man who had destroyed her people, assassinated him. Priscus records the discovery. In the morning, when a great part of the day had passed, the royal attendants, suspecting something wrong, broke down the doors. They found Attila dead from hemorrhage, and the girl weeping beneath her veil. Was she weeping from grief, relief, or fear of what would come next? The aftermath reveals the sexual dynamics of Hun society. Attila was buried with treasures and, according to Jordanes, certain of his wives followed him in death. Whether voluntarily or not remains unclear. The slaves who dug his grave were killed to keep its location secret, but rumors persisted that some of his wives were buried alive with him. The immediate collapse. Attila's death revealed the fatal flaw in his system. An empire built on sexual terror required a terrifying leader. Within a year, his sons were fighting over his wives and conquered territories. The Battle of Nedao in 454 CE saw subject peoples, Gepids, Ostrogoths and others, unite to destroy Hun power forever. The sexual violence that had bound the empire became its undoing. Jordanes writes, "The nations whom Attila had held in subjection through their women now rose up, remembering their daughters' tears and their wives' shame. Their vengeance was terrible. Ardaric, king of the Gepids, and once Attila's ally, led the rebellion with a specific battle cry: "For our violated daughters." The revenge was deliberately sexual. Hun women were systematically raped and enslaved, their children killed or castrated. The cycle of sexual violence Attila had started consumed his own people. The diaspora of Attila's wives. What happened to Attila's hundreds of wives reveals the complexity of his sexual terror system. Some, like his chief wife Kraka, tried to maintain power through their sons. Others fled back to their original peoples, if they would accept them. Many were considered polluted by their association with the scourge and faced rejection or death. The Byzantine chronicler notes, "The wives of Attila, once tokens of conquest, became refugees. Some threw themselves into rivers rather than face their shame. Others vanished into obscurity, their noble blood forever tainted by the Hun seed." The end of the Hun threat. By 455 CE, just 2 years after Attila's death, the Hun Empire was completely destroyed. His sons were dead. Elak killed at Nadau, Dengizic killed fighting the Romans, Ernarch fled to obscurity. The systematic use of sexual terror that had built the empire ensured its total destruction when power shifted. The Roman chronicler Prosper of Aquitaine wrote the epitaph, "The Huns who had used women as weapons found themselves unmanned. The terror they had sown through rape and bondage was repaid tenfold. No empire built on violated flesh can endure." The migration period acceleration. Attila's sexual terrorism had consequences beyond his empire's collapse. The fear of Hun sexual violence drove massive population movements that reshaped Europe. Entire tribes migrated not just to escape death, but to protect their women from Hun slavery. These migrations accelerated the fall of Rome. The Vandals who sacked Rome in 455, the Visigoths who conquered Spain, the Angles and Saxons who invaded Britain, all were pushed westward by fear of Hun sexual predation. Attila's rape campaigns literally changed Europe's ethnic map. The cultural trauma lasted centuries. Medieval chronicles describe Attila as Satan's spawn. The Norse sagas remember him as a monster who devoured virgins. Even today in Hungary, where he's sometimes seen as a national hero, folk songs warn young women about Attila's shadow. The weaponization template. Attila created a template for sexual violence as systematic warfare that would be repeated throughout history. The Mongols under Genghis Khan, who explicitly cited Hun tactics. The Japanese comfort women system in World War II. The rape camps in Bosnia and Rwanda. ISIS's sexual slavery infrastructure. Dr. Miranda Carter, studying systematic sexual violence, observes, Attila proved that rape could be more than a byproduct of war. It could be the primary weapon. His innovation was making sexual terror predictable, bureaucratic, and economically profitable. Modern perpetrators follow his blueprint. Even today, the threat of systematic rape drives refugee crises. Studies show that fear of sexual violence is often the primary reason families flee conflict zones, just as it was in Attila's time. The scourge of God's ghost haunts every refugee camp. The historical debate. Modern historians debate Attila's legacy. Some argue the sexual violence attributed to him was Roman propaganda, that he was no worse than other conquerors. But archaeological evidence supports the chronicle's mass graves of young women, evidence of systematic sexual trauma, the sudden depopulation of entire regions. Professor Peter Heather notes, whether Attila personally ordered every rape or simply created a system that encouraged it is irrelevant. He weaponized sexual violence on an unprecedented scale, making it central to his economic, military, and diplomatic strategy. The sanitization of Attila in popular culture, depicting him as a noble savage or tragic anti-hero, erases the experiences of hundreds of thousands of women. When we romanticize conquerors, we silence their victims. The real Attila wasn't a warrior king but a sexual terrorist who industrialized rape. The numbers that condemn. Let's be clear about Attila's legacy. 70 cities destroyed in the Balkans alone. Hundreds of thousands of women enslaved or raped. Entire populations displaced by fear of sexual violence. The ethnic map of Europe permanently altered. A template for systematic sexual warfare used for 1,500 years. Attila ruled for only 19 years. In that time, he turned sexual violence from a consequence of war into war itself. He made rape into economics, terror into diplomacy, and women's bodies into the currency of empire. If this historical examination disturbs you, it should. When we forget that sexual violence has been systematically weaponized throughout history, we fail to recognize it in the present. Attila's methods aren't ancient history. They're being used right now in conflicts worldwide. Subscribe to the Hollow Throne for more unflinching examinations of history's darkest chapters. Hit the notification bell, share this video, These stories matter because the victims deserve remembrance and the patterns demand recognition. Final reflection. Attila the Hun died on a wedding night, killed perhaps by a young woman who refused to be another victim. If true, it's history's perfect justice. The man who built an empire on rape died at the hands of the raped. The throne is always hollow. When filled by those who weaponize sexual violence, it becomes not just empty, but cursed. Every empire built on violated bodies carries the seeds of its own destruction. Attila died 1,570 years ago. His methods didn't. Think about that.